Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. I'm Ivanka Magic.
And my name is Michael Forrest. How are you, Ivanka?
I'm very well, thank you.
I mean, we're recording this straight after the last one, so probably our anecdotes, we've got to think of some anecdotes that
I've remembered one. I've remembered something from last week that I haven't told you about. So, Nick and I organise and run this thing called the Brighton Restaurant Awards Vote Online, the Bravos. So part of this is that we give the winners a trophy. And last year, and I'm in charge of the trophy. So last year I went to the Brighton wood store that do lots of things out of recycled wood. And then, so I got some nice lumps of wood and then found this local guy who I refer to as Joe Lasers, who has a laser printer and an engraving thing. And so I went to see him yesterday to talk about this year's trophies, because last year's we had a bit of perspex engraved, thus, diminishing our sustainability score.
Okay.
But this year we're going to use some laser cut poplar ply stuck onto some recycled roof beams.
Okay.
And that's what the trophy's going to be made of.
Are you excited about this trophy?
No, but I enjoyed going to talk to Joe Lasers.
Right, Joe Lasers.
Because Joe Lasers has got all these lace gadgets for cutting, laser cutting, laser engraving. He does all this mother of pearl inlay stuff. So we started having a conversation because he talked about how some of the products he makes are for extremely wealthy people.
Right.
Which reminded me entirely of our money podcast.
Yes.
Then we ended up having a very similar conversation about whether,
Rich people are people.
How do they cope? Whether they're happy. Then we talked about Scientology, Ricky Gervais, Richard Dawkins, Brian Cox, all in
sounds like this Lasers man sounds like maybe you should do a podcast with him. Very insecure.
So we had a lovely quick chat, but I was also plugging you should listen. My friend Michael and I, we record a podcast because he was telling me how much he loves a podcast as well. Don't know. Anyway, so that was my
another thorough
hopefully converting listeners one at a time.
I was like, let's just have a quick wee break, and then I remembered that weeing is currently a terrifying undertaking. I'm like, this. No, I don't wanna. Something's gonna. And I haven't had my strong painkillers yet. I can't. Stop drinking water. Stop doing anything. Yeah, going to the bathroom is. It's just not as fun as it used to be. I just finished a project, and cathartically, they needed me to delete all of the data and the code from my machine. I was like, well, because there's always this thing of stuff is going to keep coming back. Yeah. And it was like, you're going to let me just delete the whole thing? Lovely. So I deleted everything.
You don't get to do that very often, do you?
No.
See, I had nice. This was one of the conversations I ended up having as part of my last week on my project. My contract. We were talking about a contract that was being issued. They're like, there's nothing on the exit plan, said somebody who had nothing to do with the project whatsoever. And I was like, it doesn't say what format we want the data delivered in. I was like, we don't want the data. It's like, once it's been processed, it's gone. Thank you for your input, person who knows nothing about the project, but likes to offer an opinion anyway.
Here's something that's just happening live. Last night, Sharon's got the boiler cupboard open. It's like, boiler's won't come on. And it said, it had an error message. I Googled it. It said, because it's the pipe thing outside, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't get it working. She's been talking to a plumber this morning. I was thinking, it's going to, once the temperature rises again, it's going to be okay. So do we just want to, ride out a couple of days? She just, half an hour, emailed me, the quote with a sad face, how much it's going to cost. But just 1 minute ago, it's working again on its own. Yay! Boiler working. Because I had to have a shower at the gym this morning, which is my first time. And why do some people love being naked just in public? I just don't. Especially if you're not, I mean, there's not even someone particularly that should be particularly proud of themselves either. It's like, come on.
Are you judging?
Yeah, I'm judging. Don't walk around with your belly hanging out. Like, for 2 times checking, like, sitting around in your pants for 20 minutes in there, waiting for people to come in. What's wrong with you, pervert? But anyway, yes, no, I had to have a shower at the gym, figure that out. And then, yeah, I was a bit worried. But, yeah, it works again.
We also had to defrost our condensate pipe, is its correct name.
Michael and Ivanka's Condensate Pipe Podcast. You're listening. Did you use a hot water bottle? It sounds. We watched a little video of a British gas man putting a hot water. I'm like, shut up! You know that's not going to work.
Why not? Anyway, we used a watering can with hot water in.
Exactly.
Nick was leaning out the window pouring it, and then woke up this morning as a massive icicle hanging off it. So he was like, "Quick, I better go and defrost it before it freezes," because it sounded yesterday like it was going to literally explode. It was like, sounded like a what's that? Oizo,
Mr. Wazo.
That one with the really deep bass.
It's not. It's actually like underwhelmingly deep, but it's a certain classic bass modulation sound.
Well, that one that I like.
Yeah.
That was what the boiler sounded like.
Really?
Yeah.
Dubstep. From what you're saying, I was thinking you were going to go more like Burial than Mr. Wazo, but sure.
Mr. Wazo, yeah, it was. That's what it was.
What are we going to talk about? I thought maybe we should talk about feminism a little bit more.
Yeah, properly this time.
But, for me, my reference point is, are women people? Yes. But I know I perhaps haven't always had that internalised.
You haven't always thought women are people?
Well, yeah, I mean, God, I didn't want to start from here. No, I think we have our experiences and we categorise things, and I think I probably had a fairly, I certainly had a deep-rooted distrust of women for a very long time, of anyone female, and actually like preceded by a kind of probably feeling that they were somehow lesser or very different or something, like, which I'm very not proud of. But I kind of want to just come clean because I, just because I feel like it means I kind of understand how these horrible people that still say bad stuff, like I maybe I can help explain to them why they're wrong better. I don't know.
I think this is I don't want to. So I'll give you my I'll give you a
What's your
different
perspective? What's important?
So I will, first of all, I'll give you a bit of, so through university, studying electronic engineering, where there were 90 people, 5 of which were girls, women, I detested any women in science and engineering gatherings or women for this and women for that. And I was like, stop drawing attention to the fact that me being here is in some way weird or unusual. It's all very well you being all feminist, sitting there on your social work course where we're all girls together. And, so I really did have that, like, fuck off feminists, you're just making my life difficult. You're drawing attention to me and all I want to do is study engineering. So
let me get on with it. This shouldn't even be a thing.
Stop pointing it out. I really did. So I had that. That was my university experience. There is a difference between somebody assuming that in a work environment or some kind of environment that you are in some way lesser and somebody being a sexual predator.
Yes.
We fancy men and women, women and women, men and men, all fancy each other. There is a sexual urge in all of us. It is not abnormal in any way, I think, when you meet a new person to go, hello. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily are assuming that because you want to sleep with them that you think they're not human and they can't do things and they're not equal to you. I think going through that sort of, so that's what one of the things that I always found a little bit difficult, and potentially still do, is that and I'm listening to, I'm channeling Guilty Feminist podcast a little bit and thinking, oh, come on, what, at some point you've got to be able to go, fwa, and that not be like, it's like, hello. And then, I mean, the weird thing that happened to me with that sort of hashtag me too, is I was thinking, have I ever come onto a bloke in a way that they didn't want me to go? It's like, oh, and so I never did any hashtag me too, because I was thinking, am I always? And I was like, no, I do.
Sexual predator in the workplace, Ivanka,
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. But I've certainly flirted. But if negative signals have come off, I've always resisted. I've not promoted people. I've not demanded.
You've not promoted someone when negative signals were given off.
No. See? Fuck off.
It comes out.
No, what I mean is I've not been in a position to demand. And that's what the Guilty Feminist talks about, is that thing about if you're in a position of power, then it's not, if it's not a level playing field, it's not the same. However, and maybe this does make it tricky talking about feminism, but in my 20s I did embrace feminism in a more vociferous way, because I had a client, in fact it was one of our clients at LBI, and she's about 10 years older than me, and she was like, Ivanka, what do you mean? You justify yourself. I was like, okay, fair enough. And so about saying that I'm not a feminist, or being like, feminists, they get on my nerves. I meant that this whole drawing attention to the fact, because I'm like, if you walk the walk and you get involved and you do everything, then people can't in any way diminish your abilities. Was my I am not who I am. I'm not doing this job. It's like you're doing well for a girl is not praise that I want.
No.
And so sort of that sort of constantly drawing attention to equality in the workplace when I was in my early 20s got on my nerves. Yeah. As I've got older, I've embraced the fact that actually women, in order to achieve equality, which we are still far away from.
This equal pay thing is fucked up still, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still fucked up, and it's still, you can't, so yes, I am a feminist, and I will, I am a proud paying member of the Fawcett Society, who are, I send them money. I don't really get very involved. I'm sure they'd like some volunteering efforts as well, but, it's like, and it's not a political issue in terms of left, right, up, down, Jesus or not or whatever. It is a proven fact with statistics that in societies where women do better, society does better. You have better educated children, you have less, you've got, for example, when we've already mentioned Hans Rosling and his gap-minded stats. He very much talks about the fact that in order to reduce population growth, you need to reduce infant mortality, and a big part of that is educating mothers, and then reducing birth rates is to do with educating mothers, empowering them. I mean, I think I've already said at some point, I think fathers play a big role in girls' attitude. I think attitude to where they fit in society. And I mean this by, if you look at, I do believe it's a thing, and I have seen a couple of TED Talks about it, but it's this thing where my father certainly didn't question my ability to do anything because I was a girl or not. I'd be just as happily making a souffle as helping him change the oil in the car, or knitting, or doing maths, or whatever it was.
Would you say you had that thing? This is something Robert Lewis said early on as well. Like, boys, when they're little, the tendency is to go, oh, that's clever, that thing you've done. Oh, well done for making that, or whatever. And then for girls, it's like, oh, she's so beautiful, she's so pretty in her thing. Do you think you were spared the sort of, do you think that's toxic? And B, do you think you were spared some, if that is a toxic thing, do you think you were spared it?
I think it's an interesting point because I think I ended up with both. I
Yeah.
certainly got told I was clever.
I wish someone had told me I was pretty when I was little.
Well, yeah, well, it's like, I know. I think my dad, when I was a teenager, at one point, I was dressed to go to some, night out, and he went, "Oh, you'd look lovely in a bin liner." That's like, I mean, that's what your parents are there for, to go, you're lovely,
Yeah.
get on. But no, I definitely
No, I never got
the
any
clever.
Physical appearance compliments. I think it left me.
But weirdly, I also think that puts sort of in this puts this weird pressure on. You've got to be clever and you've got to be successful and you've got to look good.
Well, yes, it does seem like the list is quite long.
It's
for
a
the
bit
ladies.
endless. And I think there is this. We've definitely covered this before on the podcast. This kind of like idea that, or maybe your picture of success. Not everyone is as good at everything as everybody else. And I do think there is definitely, undeniably, this extra pressure on women on the appearance front.
Yeah.
But then I think, it's true. But so I think having your male role models, because your father is your first male role model.
Yeah.
I don't want to delve into, because I have no experience of families that are two mums or two dads, because I'm not saying they can't.
And what was it about that? Was just that there was no kind of gendered, or less of a sort of gendered kind of criteria for kind of assessing your worth, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that was a big. So I do think, though.
Do you think either of us is? Well, I guess you are. Do you think how much?
Do you think we should be talking about it?
I don't know. Like, do we know enough about it? I mean, you're a part of a feminism thing. I like formerly spotless Joss Whedon's attitude to these things, but I mean, obviously now he's wasn't very nice to his wife or whatever. But what's
his thing?
Women are people, and until that stops being surprising, then we need to keep having these conversations. Until you stop having to justify that women are human beings, the same like men, until that stops having to be a conversation, we have to keep having the conversation. But at the moment, there's shit everywhere you look. Like, if you start looking at like the Twitters, and even just in the workplace day to day, like I see it, like I see this kind of assumption of lesserness. But also, like, not just coming from the men talking to the women. Also, like, sometimes I feel like you need to not put yourself in a kind of lower rung either. What do you think about that? Am I being sexist with that?
I don't know, but that's what I think about the way my father helped. His big contribution to my upbringing was and why I got so ratty at university. I was like, I'm not on a lower rung than you. Fuck you. I'm here. This is what I'm interested in. It's got nothing to do with my gender whatsoever. And so I think, yes, that needs to be instilled in you. It's like I had this moment when my mother-in-law said to my small child, "Are you a good little girl?" "Yes." "Well, good little girls don't climb." "You fucking well do." I was like, oh. So,
both
you get
physically
these
and metaphorically.
Yes, I was
God damn it.
These are things that we do not say ever to my small female child. But so yes, women need to be. So that there is plenty of history of downtroddenness that creates behaviour. And I think, for me, one of the most important things that women need is female mentors and role models. Even though I said that in your early life, and maybe it wasn't the fact that my father was a man, it wasn't the fact that he was a man that made him a good mentor, role model. But then my mum always worked. They're really, in my house, I grew up in a house, my dad was a bit of a Mediterranean, I'll play with the children, but I'm a bit tired now, I'm going to sit on the sofa. "Oh, can't you wash up again, please? I love you." There was a bit of that. But they both worked at various times. There was a point at which he stayed at home with us, and she worked. Yeah. She never stayed at home with us. My poor mother has always worked. Yeah, so in our actual house, the gender roles weren't particularly, you know, there wasn't a, dad does this, mother does that type thing.
Yeah.
Or, my mother is a extremely capable woman. And I think, so I've never doubted that I can work and knit. My mum can fix her car. There's no real. I think the only thing my mum, because my mum's been widowed since she was very young, really, 46. She at some point discovered this thing called a jar key, which is like this thing that releases the air from a jar so you can undo it really easily. She was like, Ivanka, I'm going to buy you one of these. Because this is the only thing that's annoying about not having somebody with stronger hands than you in the house. It's like, but it's that kind of, it's the equality hasn't been achieved yet. And we need it. Society needs it. Men need it more than they think they need it. There is no need to feel threatened by having a spouse who is your equal, or having a daughter who will achieve more than you, or sister, or whatever it is. But I think there's no doubt that this isn't done, and we need to keep talking about it. We don't necessarily need to conclude, do we?
No, of course not. One thing that is sort of interesting is how little Theresa May's femaleness seems to be part of any conversation at all. It's just like, I think, it feels like the fact that she's a woman seems like the least of it. And I don't think anyone's going, oh, well, if she wasn't a woman, X, Y, Z. No. I think
that's true.
So that's pretty good. There's certainly ahead of America in.
Well, I think the Maybot label has exceeded any gender labels. I think I hear that more than any conversation about whether or not she's a woman. Female Prime Minister, you don't get that kind of. Though I do find it odd when people refer to a woman as an actor. I'm like,
well, I'm trying to embrace it. Yeah, it always
just
seems a bit horrible to say actress now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I'm waitress and there's all these things, and I'm like, well, yeah, but she's a girl.
This is like, we're not the guilty feminist. We're not. I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable kind of doing a big call to action. Women, you've got to demand that you're treated the same. You've got to have those conversations. You've got to walk into the room. You can't just do what the man would do. Although there's a lot of generalizing about men on there that I don't feel like. I've always been. I don't walk around feeling unassailable because of my maleness. I regularly feel very scared and a little bit pathetic, and self-conscious, and I don't look as good as I could. And I have. It's not like being male makes you. This whole kind of gives you everything. It's I have all sorts of.
But I think that's the
concerns.
problem. It's that if you're not careful, any conversation about feminism translates into some sort of attack on men. And I don't, it's like, we're not trying to bring, we are not trying to bring you down. We are trying to get you to help us up.
And I know this. I understand this deeply. And that's the only time I would sort of call out and sometimes they have a comedian on who will sort of start going into that territory, and I'll be like, you don't have to make this about taking men down.
Yeah, no, I'm not interested in taking anyone down. But there is also, I think it's more and more important that men talk about this.
Yes.
And I was talking to, there's a freelancer who worked with Nick a lot over the last couple of years, and she's just going off to do some other projects, so she won't be working with us for a while. But she and I were talking about this. It's like, Nick gave her full freedom on some work, on some content work that she was doing, and tone of voice, and she's very well aware that if he was criticising her or doesn't like somebody, it's got fuck all to do with their gender, everything to do with how capable they are and whether or not they're an arsehole.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and so therefore somebody like Nick, and to some extent, you know, and somebody like you, who does believe that women are people too, and that there's no issue, and like, well, why do we need to talk about this? Because they are. And
Yeah, but
but actually, I think it's for that all those guys, it needs to become less and less okay to be a misogynist.
yeah, and I do come across it, and I, you know, I think I've got it tempered. Yeah, it's certainly not something I'm doing anymore. Like, certainly without not realizing it. But yeah, like I have the privilege, you know, and it does need to be the person with the privilege that makes the changes,
Yeah.
because there's, you know, the underdog or whatever is, they can talk and talk, but it's not until, you know, the men start to change that things happen, because that's what has to happen. But then there's also this worry that, like, I don't want to mansplain feminism to anyone. I don't want to, like, I don't want to explain to you what you're doing wrong as a woman, like, because that's fucking, you know, isn't that the same thing?
Yeah. But you
But
can
I
talk
will.
to
I
other
think
men.
I am in my rights to say to someone, you are. If someone is being infuriatingly sort of like undervaluing themselves, I think, I don't know. Like, maybe it's not my job, but like, that's when I get most frustrated. Is like, what are you? How do you expect anything to change if you embrace? And I guess in some ways it's sort of like easier to just kind of embrace the status quo and just kind of like embrace the sort of like a subordinate or like lesser kind of like thing, and just, oh yeah, thanks, yeah, help me with this thing
Yeah.
that I could very easily do myself.
But
But
you can give that person a, you know, the it is a mentoring, it's a conversation, it's a go for coffee. If someone you work with, go for coffee and go, you do understand that you're actually, you have every right to sit up. I worked with a woman recently who wanted to include in a presentation the fact that she was currently doing a master's.
yeah,
And I was like, why do you don't need to put that in. You're justifying you doing your job, and you're doing your job, and you're doing your job well. You don't need to explain what qualifies you to be in this role. And she was like, well, but I want to put it on. I was like, if we were two blokes sitting in front of a presentation, would we even be having this conversation? So I was like, no, I'll delete it. Like, you know, you are good at your job. Do your job. Just be you, and don't explain yourself to people. And I think sometimes women do need to, and I say this at the lofty age of 43, but women, I often see women younger than me that I sort of take to one side and go, you're really good at your job, you know, walk like you're really good at your job, you know, don't apologise for being good at your job. But I think, well, I also think that you and I are in a, regardless of gender, we are both at least confident, if not to say cocky. So it's like, it is an esteem thing, and often a sort of waiting for permission. But that's what I think is really cool at the moment, looking around the world, you know, the reaction. You know, maybe this will be our thing we can post-rationalise when Donald Trump has moved on. You know, sort of like he has woken up a whole...
the fact that women voted for Trump is just the most incredible, unbelievable thing. It's just a man who literally numbers people, gives you a score in public, not even secretly in his own brain.
He doesn't even pretend. It's like, but I listened not so long ago to an interview with a woman on Radio 4. Imagine, and she was me listening to Radio 4. It was Abortion Awareness Week or something like that, and this woman was on this massive pro-lifer, and she was describing the reasons that she was a pro-lifer. And she talked about being 19 and having a boyfriend and getting pregnant, and she and the boyfriend were all excited about having a baby, and then his parents got involved and basically coerced her into having an abortion. Right. And her emotional reaction, which must be unimaginably horrible if that's, you know, if that's not what you want, what you're after I can't imagine it. But she has internalized this as her battle being about pro-life, when in fact she's a perfect pro-choicer. She had the choice removed from her, and that's what fucked her up. And that has made her into a pro-lifer. And I just think, but if from a very young, for
do we want to reinforce this pro-life word? Can we just say anti-choice?
Okay. Well, that's true. Yeah,
I hate
that's
that.
true. It's terrible.
Pro-life. I'm pro-life. You're pro what? Any life.
Yeah, it's
however
true.
much it's fucking doomed from the start. I just would rather something was doomed and alive. Not that, fatalism, but this fucking bullshit of balance. Like, that's something I'd like to just take down, that bit of language, if possible.
We'll call it pro-choice and anti-choice.
Yeah, let's do that.
So the reason that this woman was anti-choice was because she had no choice, which makes no fucking sense whatsoever. But that's what happens when somebody has been damaged and downtrodden. They're like, it's like, I don't want to... She needs therapy. I feel sorry for her. And those women that have voted for Trump, even though he was recorded with that whole unspeakably disgusting, pussy-grabbing statement, that women voted for him, either tells me that there's some kind of sociopath, or they have been so fucked up that they just don't know what to do. They're like, they can't think for themselves.
Stockholm syndrome
totally.
On a grand scale.
On a massive, massive scale. What's it? Gaslighting, or like fucking ridiculous. That you've not been allowed in your life to think about what's good for you and what's right for you.
It's a lack of imagination as well. Like, you can't imagine a world where that's not okay. Like, and maybe just someone's life is so entrenched in that kind of understanding of the world that they just literally can't imagine what we're talking about. Like,
it's just it's but on the positive side, we've got all this this new youth movement after this latest mass shooting in America. The front people are girls, and I think that's cool. They're sitting there. I
don't think it matters whether they're girls or boys.
I think they need to be girls for a bit.
It's good that they're girls. Yeah.
They need to be.
Well, yeah. It's like you can't because the damage is there. Like, you can't pretend that there isn't a prejudice and not even generations, just millennia, just from. I don't know if it's always 100%. Actually, like, it's not millennia. It is like modernish, like hundreds, maybe thousands of years that women have been turned into these sort of second-class citizens. It's not like hunter-gatherer societies. That's not a thing.
No.
But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
So this movement, the young lasses who are not questioning their right to speak up and question their president, I think, and their lawmakers. And there was one, she's a young girl, being interviewed she's like, we've come here, no one's talking to us, but we're not going away. We know why we're here, and you can't fob us off with platitudes. Good for you. Good. Just fucking have it.
Did you see the thing with Michael Moore this week?
No.
Where he sort of tweeted this thing about, no woman has ever created an atomic bomb. No woman has ever, done X and Y, like, terrible thing. And there's just been a huge storm of, yes, women can be bad. Look, this woman was involved in the bomb. This one was involved in this genocide.
Women are assholes too.
Women, they're people. They're not fucking angels. They're not something different. They're not an other.
No.
They're people. They can be assholes. Lots of them are. Lots of them voted for Trump. They're assholes. Michael Moore getting it wrong. So that was quite funny this week because he got pwned on the Twitters.
There's definitely some cool young women younger women than me on the Twitter, kind of taking down the trolls in a kind of
Oh, that's good.
fuck you
I'd
sort
like
of
to
way.
see how they're doing that. Sounds cool.
Just literally mostly by going fuck you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's fair
Well, yeah, probably all they deserve a lot of the time.
I had so yes, so but one does still encounter misogyny in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, how does that? So I don't. I sort of, now that I'm a bit more aware, I might kind of like I don't know, like glimpse. But what have you had any? I don't know. What have you been?
What's happened to you, Vanka? Well,
Yeah, I don't want to ask that. As a woman, what has happened to you, presumably you've been misogyny that. Please tell me your stories and I will make sad sounds. Oh, that's terrible. Oh God, that must have been so hard for you.
yeah.
No, but if there's some like advice, I don't know, if there's something people can take from how you handled something, then I think that's valuable, isn't it?
It is valuable. How have I handled things? Not very well, mostly.
Oh, no.
No. I mean, occasionally one encounters men who don't understand that they are a misogynist or that
Right.
they have misogynistic tendencies that they haven't fully examined in a self-reflecting way.
Okay.
And so they encounter you as a strong, intelligent, well-informed woman in the workplace. These are labels that I am applying to myself. And they go, hello, so tell us about this thing that you're making. And what happens to me then in those circumstances? Because they're trying to be right on, but what they're being is fucking patronising. And me, I just look at them and go, are we having this conversation? Are we having this conversation? And then I end up kind of getting into these like...
Half of me is like, what an utter arsehole. And half of me is like a tiny guilty part of me is like, I kind of want to go at that. So little, no, I don't even, I can't even.
So
no,
little
I'm
girl, tell me about your report.
Tell me about your little report. It's just funny.
like...
Tell me about this little thing that you think is important you're doing while I do all the real work as a man. No, I can't even do it. I can't
I've
even,
had
it's
two big opportunities of that in mostly people don't do that to me anymore because why would you? Because you'd get... I'm so shocked when it happens to me now and so flabbergasted and taken aback that I don't actually know. It's happened twice in the last 5 or 6 years. One was a sort of interview scenario and one was in a internal board type scenario. And I was so shocked that it was happening to me that I kept trying to explain myself. I was like, sorry, clearly I haven't explained myself properly, because why would you be asking me such fucking stupid questions? Would you be asking me these questions if of course I fucking know what this is. I wrote the report type thing. And so what happens then to me is I go, and I just won't let it go because I'm like, why are you speaking to me in this tone of voice? I don't understand. And it's a deeply unsatisfying experience. The interview scenario, I wish I'd just gone after 10 minutes. Clearly, you think you're interviewing some sort of junior, so I'll see you later.
You told me about that. Have you cut off interviews?
When I've been interviewing, I have.
But have you done it when you've been in one? I've done it like more than once.
What, when you've been interviewed?
Yeah. It's like,
No,
I don't think this is going to work. Like I've done that at least twice.
See, that's interesting because
like cut it short. It's like, well, no, this is. I mean, I don't like.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I've just been able to tell straight away, like, we can't work together. This isn't going to work for whatever reason.
But I think that's a really good story, because I would never ever like this. I would just like, oh, well, everyone must have a good impression of me, otherwise they will tell somebody, and then that's my blah blah blah. I wouldn't. I've stopped an interview as an interviewer and gone, thank you very much for your time, but it's not going to work. But then I'm in a explicit real position of power, and it is my decision, and as the interviewee, that's one of my big regrets. In fact, with both of those situations that I talk about, I should have said, I'm sorry, you clearly don't know who you're talking to. It's not going to work.
Interview advice that I got quite early on. There's not a power dynamic here. It's like, what can we do for each other? Treat it as a meeting. If someone starts to try like starts trying to make it like an interview, like here's the role and here's the, if someone starts trying to be, because they don't know, like we've interviewed enough people that we know that we go in half the time unprepared.
Yeah.
The interviewers are not in some special magical position of knowing anything. Like, so if you go into an interview, do not be intimidated by that situation. Just like know that they need you. Like, if you can do it, they need you to do it. And it's not like they're giving you something. No, you're reaching an arrangement whereby you're giving each other something. They're giving you some money. You're giving them your skills and your experience and all this stuff. But yeah, I've literally said to someone, like, yeah, I mean, I think that you picked the wrong technology. I think like the kind of way you're approaching this just isn't going to work. Yeah. So you know,
see you later.
And because I've sort of said it like that, I just sort of know that, you know, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, they'll be like, I guess that guy was right. So in terms of equality, so one thing that is a very clear marked thing is equal pay.
Yes.
But something that we don't do is talk about how much we get paid with each other.
Yeah.
And like I'm still not comfortable, but there's a very strong case to be made for people talking about how much they're getting paid. And certainly if you're not doing that, and we've talked about this, haven't we? But you know, you don't even know if you're getting paid less than someone doing the same thing as you, unless you kind of overcome that sort of taboo and have that conversation with people you work with, male and female. Yeah. So that's something that kind of probably needs to happen to just you know, accelerate that a little bit. But yeah, what are the other what are other kind of like things that where the inequality is sort of evident? Because I wish I internalized a few more things, but that money is the one I think of.
I think money is one that should be constantly attacked and constantly addressed, but I think there's an interesting additional factor in this. It's like, so one of the things my father did say to me, and we've had this conversation, it's like, you need to get a proper profession, because if you have children and you get divorced, you're going to have the children and you're going to have to pay for everything. And that was his, but he planted that in my head.
Had he never heard of alimony?
Well, his assumption was it was all going to, you know, he was planning for the worst. It's like, you need to be able to be independent. And I think there is this, often women are it is on them to sort out the childcare. They get stuck with the child and the burden of bringing up the child. So therefore they can't pursue their career with as much gusto as their other half. And it's very quick. That was what that Mrs. Moneypenny book that I read, The Love Is Not Enough, about money, talked about. It talked about as soon as you let a little bit go, you can never make that money back up. So you drop your career, or you drop your money, or you take your foot off the pedal a bit because you want to be around for the children, and then you just can't get back in, whether you did it. And it's like so you do end up inevitably dependent on this partner that earns more. And I know that is a generalisation, and you've got, but I don't know if that's just money again.
Something I always come back to with that is, like, I always I mean, the reason I like working in the private sector is because I feel like I can talk to a person about those things and say, like, I want X amount, I want this freedom, I want this and that. And this is harder in the public sector, where everything's like spinal column number 36 XYZ, like where it is more institutionalized. But I do like it sort of infuriates me when there's this sort of like assumption that the system or the institution or the person paying you is this sort of utterly immovable, unchangeable thing, whereas it can't be.
No.
And that's not something I'm willing to ever accept. Like, in terms of how much I'm getting paid, in terms of my freedoms, I would not accept that. And maybe it's harder in the public sector, but you can't just accept that something's unchangeable. Like, you have to...
Yeah, But I think this is the crux of the problem. If you're born into, again, going back to, we are, educated professionals. We're not unskilled workers or anything. So you're born into something. You're told your choices are to be a beauty. You can do an NVQ beauty or an NVQ childcare, and then therefore, your position in society, you've been put in your place from a very early age, and so you're not going to go into the office and go, fuck you, you're not paying. What? Bob, who sits next to me, is earning £6 more an hour. Fuck you. You're not going to do that because you don't believe you have the right to do that.
But because the conversation, I think, in that environment is, I am on this rung, this person is on this rung. What did he do differently? What haven't I done that he's done? So why aren't I on that rung? Like, I suppose that is how it's going to manifest in terms of like unequal pay.
Do you know the two Ronnies sketch where there's like the John Cleese and then the two Ronnies, and then they go, I am working class. He is middle class. He is, I can't remember the quote, something like superior to me or something, and then it's got the upper class. But it feels a bit like, that whole women know your place sort of statement. It's like, no, it is not your right. You do not have the right to go and question things. And I think it is that you're listening to all that suffragette stuff. Recently, it's like, it's 100 years of women aged 30 married with property who were allowed to vote. It's not really, it wasn't the day all women got the vote. But they did fight, and they fought hard, and that is one of the, it's that the right to be an activist even in your own little life. You don't have to be an activist for everybody, but just for yourself. Say, look, no.
Yeah. So do you think, that was kind of where my mind was going a bit next, was like, how often do you, like, it's exhausting having to kind of call someone out on something.
Yeah.
And then it's now your responsibility to educate them. So, like, there's this thing of like, well, explain to me what's wrong. It's like, you read the book, I'm busy. Like, why is it now my job to be your education? And like, it's like, how do you pick your battles with that? Like,
I don't know. I think it's just to what you're, I have always had a very deep sense of something being unfair. And if I think something is unfair, I can't help but have a pop at it. It's like,
I think I'm the same. Actually, I can't think of any time that something like that's wound me up that I haven't like been, right, we're doing this.
Yeah, or it's even from, I remember in even like nursery, I think it's like, why does he always get to ride that tricycle? It's not fair. I want to have a go. Literally, I can't remember me not being willing to, but again,
well, our sense of justice is one of the first things that we get as humans as well.
And I think that my again, I had parents who did, were CND members. My father, my grandpa used to collect money for the ANC. I got taken along to these sort of fundraisers, and I just had an awareness that you can start a revolution if you want to. But then, I was thinking I suggested activism as a topic. I was thinking, what sort of a lame-ass activist am I? You watch videos of, you watch what people do, and you just think, my God. But equally, if we all actually fought our own corners and called people out all the time, then things should get better more generally. You correct someone's language, like him, his or hers, him or her, and it's like, just fucking let me finish my sentence. Like, it's not the point of my story. So there's kind of a scale between being that person that just constantly corrects people and constantly calls people up on them, which no one really wants to be the nag. I don't.
Sometimes people
like,
say less when they mean fewer. Sometimes people.
That annoys
the
me.
Apostrophes. I can't have that conversation every time, because it just derails it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to let people make their point.
What's important enough? But they do it every time as well. You're like, just...
So yes, money, equal pay,
yeah.
and education. That's the answer.
So in education, being treated differently, or being educated
Well, no, just
about
being educated that you have the right to demand things, that you have workers' rights, that you still do for a bit, and that these have been hard fought for. Hearing people go, like, oh, I don't want to vote, I'm not really interested. People have died so you can vote. Fucking go out and vote. Don't, just understanding a bit of how things became what they are.
Did you see that comment, that quote about that thing about anyone that has the choice not to get political is privileged? So so we need to pick people up on that as well. Like, and myself, obviously, like included. I've always been like, fuck politics, fuck all of that. Partly because I kind of believe that it's a lot of the power structures are coming from somewhere else, but also because there's nothing squeezing me or forcing me to have to engage with it. Because I think people, no one likes it.
No. It's just you've got to. It's not going to get better on its own.
I'm feeling like, I mean, the thing is, like, I've got a job and that's tiring, and I've got these aspirations that are also tiring, but I like more and more. I'm like, okay, I need to be doing something. This NHS situation, this, like, for me, that's where I'm like, this political, some sort of thing. I need to do something, but it just all seems too small, doesn't it? But so it does have to be habits. It does have to be day to day. And so just in the same way that not taking a plastic straw is important, even though it's a pain in the arse, I guess, just like spotting instances of inequality, unfairness, you just have to kind of go, all right, this is happening, don't you?
Yeah, you do. You really have got to. And I think you can't be passive.
And with that, there's also this thing of, and this is something where I can't, but you got to approach it with the goal of changing someone's mind, not with the goal of hurting them.
Yeah, and that's hard.
Yeah, because you just want to hurt them.
Yeah. Maybe you can smack them around the head and then have a discussion with them.
Yeah, hurt them and then. I don't know, because like if we just kind of shout at each other, that doesn't work either.
No, Sadly, I watched that the thing that made me question in a big way my activism. I'm not an activist. Somebody described because I'm a clicktivist or whatever they're called these days. But I was like, how much do I really believe in anything? When I watched this quote from, it's so disrespectful not to know this young woman's name, but she's like a 17-year-old that got executed somewhere at the beginning of the Second World War because she was in the resistance. At 17 to knowingly give your life, it's just amazing. Just like, how do you? And I was reminded of her because I was having drinks with a couple of fellas in their 70s who, like, your 1960s protester types, and they were like, what's wrong with you? Where is the youth today? We were on the streets, we were smashing things up and breaking it up and having a go. And I don't know, and it was like, well, where are the young people today? And I don't know where they are.
Well, it's making me think, on Netflix they've got this Letterman series that they've started. So he's got 2 interviews on there. It needs no introduction. And the first one he did was Obama. Yeah. And in the middle of that, he interviews John Lewis, the civil rights activist, who, like, the beatings and the walk, so much sort of prejudice, so much kind of effort and, like, sacrifice in what he did. That's worth seeing, if not just to really realise how angry to get with Donald Trump's tweets at him, where Trump was like, oh, maybe you should sort out your failing district before you start criticising. It's like, how I mean, I guess I was ignorant about this person too until I saw this Netflix thing. But let's all stop being ignorant about that and sort of see what true sacrifice and activism is. And then, like, you know, we if we can just do a fraction of that, then I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
But also there was something in that episode where Obama sort of said something that you'd said that I'd like maybe not listened to quite properly, but then I listened to it properly when Obama said it, and I was like, oh shit, I should probably listen to it properly when Ivanka said it.
Is it because I'm a girl?
Probably,
Yeah,
subconsciously.
I thought so.
I mean,
anyway, what was this amazing thing that Obama and I both said?
So what he said was, like, with like our bubbles, you know, in the social media bubbles, we're experiencing different realities to each other. We are actually, like, our realities are all massively divergent, which is the point you'd sort of made, but I hadn't quite kind of like thought about it in those terms of what if I am a Fox News kind of, I've got my Facebook friends, I've got my bubble, my reality is fundamentally different from, you know, the libtard over there's reality, and it's a huge problem when everyone's realities are so divergent that how can you then communicate? How do you then have a baseline of communication between people when you're just living on different planets the whole time?
Yeah, I use this example though because I've managed a few people or worked with a few people, and I'm like, I'm saying a thing and you're saying a thing, and I'm really trying to listen, and you seem to be listening, but we're still not communicating. There's something completely off in our communication, and I've likened it to. But I read this book about one of the first robot experiments with AI, and they tried to teach this robot to build a brick tower, which is something most 2-year-old humans can do. And they, got the arm working and picking things up and what have you, and they sort of went to test it. And the robot started building the tower from midair because they hadn't explained gravity. They hadn't programmed gravity in. And it's like, I find that thing when sometimes you're having a conversation with people and you're like, our gravity we're not starting from the same place. I know about gravity and you don't, or you do and I don't, but we can't actually find a place to start a conversation. That's always been my go-to reminder that if you haven't got your gravity sorted out, there's no building, no tower.
So should we, if like this was our flimsy feminism podcast
Flimsy feminism
episode, our flimsy attempts to speak about something important, and it's like it's a place to start. Like if we gotta, this is our backyard. There's women, men, and vice versa. There's like that's definitely something you can't segregate. So the fact that we're like still not even there, like with that gender equality is, let's stamp this out, and then we can get onto the real stuff. I wish I kind of understood what the goals of feminism were a bit more though. At the moment, it's I guess like if. Again, money is this quantifier, isn't it?
It is.
So
it is.
I guess that's why it's something to focus on.
It is something to focus on that everybody.
Fucking
can
money.
focus on.
It's just can't escape it, can you? It's just the meaning and freedom and it's everything sucks. Okay, and on that note, thanks for listening to our podcast this week.
Yes, thank you.
If you like it, go to grandpodcast.com. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Podcast Grand. Well, at some point, I'm actually going to link the Twitter from the grandpodcast.com website, which you would probably expect me to have done a while ago, but I just keep forgetting to do it. So where can people find you?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter and ivanka.blog.
Cool.
That's it.
Have you written any blog posts yet?
No.
Next week?
No. But, I'm skiing next week, so the week after.
Okay, week after. You can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter. And you can find my website, michaelforestmusic.com, and all this music that I'm chucking between things. I've made that.
If you have enjoyed this podcast and you would like other people to enjoy it too, please write us a review on iTunes and maybe give us 5 stars so iTunes tells people about us. We can beat the robots, people, but only with 5-star reviews. That's the most stars.
So it's excellent. Also, I told someone about our podcast last week, and he had an Android phone, yet in his podcast app he searched the iTunes podcasts. So apparently, just Apple is the destination for everything. So we can just talk about iTunes reviews because it'll kind of affect everyone probably.
Well, there you go.
All right. Well, thanks very much for listening. And we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.